Welcome to the Voices That Propel Us, stories of justice, action, and community, a space where justice meets action and community voices rise. Each episode, we bring you stories from the front lines, changemakers, disruptors, and everyday heroes who are building a more just, equitable, and liberated world. This is more than a podcast. It's a call to listen, learn, and move together. You were just listening to music from the incredibly talented Stephen Kong. You can find him on Spotify and Bandcamp. Today we have with us Genevieve Smith. Genevieve works as a facilitator to social justice organizations across the power-holding spectrum, from foundations to intermediary funders, to nonprofits, to collaboratives and collectives. Genevieve loves art, gardening, being alive, and riding bicycles across New York City and state. She wants to live in a world where philanthropy doesn't need to exist and people have what they need to thrive and be well. She loves mischief, jokes, and useless behavior. Well, hi, Genevieve. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. I'm really excited and really honored and grateful that you're taking the time to share this platform with me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing so well. Thank you for having me and for being so generous. I love process. And one of the things I really appreciate about you that I think other people should hear is all of the care that went into the prep of this, like sending questions in advance, like examples of how you do this work. And so I already feel so cared for coming into this space.
No, thank you so much for saying that. That really means a lot to me that you picked up on that. So, I think like not a lot of people realize like the behind the scenes to make it happen. So thank you for saying that though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, just to start off with, I know that you said that you worked as a facilitator to social justice organizations, which I think is really cool and which really attracted me to your work. So can you please share what does this really mean in practice and in spirit?
Yeah. So yes, I work as a facilitator and sometimes consultant to social impact organizations. And so what that looks like is folks across I like to think of it as the power holding spectrum. So foundations, the folks giving grants and distributing money, as well as the folks receiving that money, and all of the folks in between. So I think about facilitation and my role as a facilitator as really the simplest way to say it is helping people talk to each other and talk about the work, which can be really hard. So I'm very much, and one of the reasons I prioritize my facilitator role over my consultant role is I'm really a guide for folks. So often I'll tell folks like, the guy folks call when they've been trying to solve what feels like a really, really, really big problem or a really big, vague question for a long time. And they're kind of talking in circles and everybody's a little bit mad at each other, but they don't quite know how to talk about it. And it's like, oh, this again. And so I work to help those folks get unstuck and actually see new ways forward.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I'd love to hear more about your journey to getting to this point. So what experiences or moments led you into this work of facilitating across the power holding spectrum?
I think there were a lot of them. But when I first started my career in the social sector, I was working with working for a disability services organization. And I was right out of college and I was like, I have an economics degree and I think that we can measure impact using hard data and it'll be really simple. And I was wrong. I was very wrong about that. And that became really clear really quickly. And so just a lot of questions for me started coming up around like, well, what does it take for an organization to collect data that actually matter to their mission? And that's a really complicated question because some of it's culture, but a lot of it is like, what are funders asking for? And and so ever since then, that was in 2014, I've been kind of like reverse engineering that problem, which has led me like sort of up the ladder of power. So like working from with direct service organizations up to, well, wait, who's asking for the information, who's giving the money, who's making the decisions, and it's wild because on paper I feel like it's a really meandering path, but it also makes a lot of sense to me, because in order to have those conversations, which, just to be explicit, were conversations about what might it look like to align our data and knowledge practices. So that's like, what data are we collecting? What's in the survey? What data are we storing? Whose knowledge counts when we're making decisions, whether it's qualitative or quantitative? And I promise I'll stop talking about data soon, because it's not actually what my job is about now, but it got me here. Right. So having these conversations about how might we align these practices with our stated values, which in the social sector, and I work with progressive and left of center organizations, are often about equity, justice, shared accountability, collective responsibility. When we start to say, okay, well, if we don't want to be extractive, or if we don't want to cause harm in our practices, like, what does that actually look like? Especially because over the years, so many practices that the social sector or nonprofits and foundations have kind of inherited have been from the private sector. And in the private sector, the purpose of collecting data is to monetize that data and exploit that data. Which we don't want to do in the social sector, or I hope we don't want to do. So anyway, those conversations ultimately became way less about data and a lot more about power. And whenever we talk about power, especially in jobs where people tend to, and I feel like I can say this because I've worked in the sector for so long, I love the sector, and also, come on, guys, come on, us. But is a really, really classic kind of like nonprofit and foundation trope. Is one of like, I've tied my identity as a good person to the fact that I have a job at a nonprofit. And the minute we start to say, hey, actually, the way that these jobs are being done might actually be causing harm, doesn't feel like accountability. It feels like an attack. And so in having these conversations about like, hey, how is this practice of collecting this specific data is actually in line with our values? That was never a, okay, how do we move forward conversation? That was a, well, you don't understand. And I've been here for X amount of years, and like, here's my social justice resume. So a lot of like shame and defensiveness came up. So that's all to say that I was facilitating way before I knew there was a name for it. I didn't know that what I was doing was facilitating, which comes with its risks, but really helping people like navigate these feelings of like, ooh, I'm feeling attacked, or I'm feeling some shame, or I'm feeling misunderstood, or I'm not feeling heard, or really defensive in other ways, or feeling really sad, and like, right, how do we move towards something practical when we don't have the language to like navigate that emotional part of the work, and also make sure that we're not lashing out at each other or causing harm towards each other. So really, in order to be able to do my work around values aligned practices, I had to learn how to talk to folks about power. I also had to figure out like my own relationship to power. Like I'm a white femme, which is like queer leftist white speak for white lady. Like I've like am always continuing my own political education. Like I'm not an expert at all, and I've had to unlearn a lot of stuff. And I'm sure when we talk in like 3 years, I'll be like, you know that thing I said on your podcast? I don't know about that.
No, I love that. And I've shared with you before too, but like I've spent I would say most, if not all of my career in the nonprofit sector, and I've like come across that tension too as well, like wanting to create change but having those limitations. And even the nonprofit sector, it does become a numbers game. Like you got to meet your numbers so you could get the grants X, Y, and Z. And I think it's really important for us to like realize like not being extractive. So what did you do to like ensure it not being as extractive, or even if you did need to extract information, like how to make that relationship reciprocal from like the people?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about being independent is I have a lot of influence, but I don't often
Okay.
have like the ultimate decision making power. But
Mhm.
I will say what's been cool about doing this work is over the years of seeing my clients and other foundations too, because other folks are
Mhm.
doing this work. But seeing foundations move from demanding whatever data their like board thinks they need, right?
Okay.
To actually engaging with grantees to say, like, you decide what information is actually going to be helpful for you, which is its
Okay.
own kind of wild uh hairball
Uh-huh.
because so many nonprofits have been in this cycle of like we've got to design for whatever the funder wants, and so
Mhm.
they haven't necessarily like developed the space or the time or the capacity to say, actually, we do know what data we want, and it's this. And
Okay.
so I've worked with foundations to do like that kind of work with grantees to say, all right, what are the frameworks that you use to really figure out
Yeah.
like what information is going to be important to you? But a lot of it actually ends up looking like conversations of like, sure, maybe you think um, like I worked with an arrest support
Mhm.
organization last summer, and one of the pieces of information their funders wanted was whether or not people were employed. And these are folks like calling a hotline once they've been arrested to talk to an attorney.
Okay.
And we were like, is that do,
Yeah.
whether or not somebody's employed, does that like change your decision making? Does it change
Right.
your work?
Right.
And really, the conversation that we got to was actually that perpetuates a lot of
Right.
assumptions and ideas about um, personal responsibility and all of these sort of like violent structures that we think about. So we were able to
Yeah.
actually build out some principles for them to go back to the funder and say, you know what, we're not going to collect that information. What we
Okay.
are going to collect though is X, Y, and Z. And being able to root that in like a political education frame is really helpful. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, because then it's not like, no, we're just not doing it because we don't want to, but still
Right.
give us the
Right.
money. But it's like, we understand like why you're thinking that way, funder, but
Mhm.
we would love to have you come along with us. You've
Okay.
said that you're interested in a more equitable world, and this is a step towards that.
Yeah, no, I really love that. Thank you for sharing that. And, I'd love to talk with you more about your other interests as well. So I love that you brought this up like in your bio. So how do art, gardening, and cycling shape the way that you show up in justice work?
So yeah, especially like um it's so funny because I keep saying I'm not a data consultant, and then I'm like data, 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 data,
Yeah.
data. But all of that like shaped the facilitation work that I do, which is now much more about like organizational effectiveness and how we make decisions. So
Yeah.
art and gardening and cycling and so many other things. Just
Mhm.
I love to play. I love to have
Okay, I love that.
fun. Um, and riding a bike makes me feel like a kid.
Hmm.
Weaving through New York City traffic is like really, 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 really fun. Um, and so that's one thing. Like um I've recommitted to joy and play, where like
Mm,
really bringing joy and play into my work.
yeah.
Especially in situations that feel really heavy. So
Okay.
not like an irreverent joy or a like, oh, don't worry about it, like be positive,
Yeah.
kind of a thing, but
Okay.
rather like really rooting in that like human experience of joy and play only when it's available to us because it's not
Hmm.
always available to us. But I think in terms of how all of these things influence my work, my brain is
Yeah.
always going, which can feel frustrating sometimes. But
Yeah.
um, I think there's so much to be learned from
Yeah.
everything we do. So for me, yeah, it's cycling. It's also being an amateur sort of good bicycle mechanic,
Hmm.
um, and just like learning how things work
Yeah.
and learning that like especially if there are any folks listening who know about bicycles, like fighting with a derailleur
Hmm.
over and over and over again, and like it's something like that kind of work, that very like tangible work has been
Okay.
so helpful for me because so much of my work is really abstract and it's very
Right.
based in feelings and it's very based in like, okay, what might be possible to like move through this conflict? And then at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day, you're like, why am I tired? I didn't build anything. Why am I exhausted? And so to have something that I can actually like mess with and but
Yeah.
also see like my own hand, the influence of my hands on something and the influence of my brain on something is really, really fun. And it actually has taught me so much about delayed gratification. So
Mm-hmm.
I think about that. I use like metaphors about bikes in my facilitation
That's really
whenever
cool.
it's appropriate, which is not often. But similar with gardening, like it's
Yeah.
that has taught me so much too. I'm a very impatient person, and a really helpful reminder in this work has been like you can plan the garden
Uh-huh.
as clearly and as quote unquote perfectly as you would like, it's still gonna germinate at the time those seeds germinate.
Right,
Like
right.
you
That's really
can't
cool.
like get it, you can't get it perfectly. But my friend Gabi Fitz, who's also a consultant and has become a dear, dear friend, she runs a practice called Think Twice in Chicago.
Okay.
We end up using a garden metaphor in our work quite a bit, and we've really pulled on that thread as far as far as we can take it. And so yeah, I think like all of these things teach me patience and gratitude and being okay with like right. Abundance and thirst can exist at the same time in the same garden, and that doesn't mean
Yeah.
something is like morally wrong. So like being okay with being in the in between. Yeah, and then like art makes me cry all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an art historian. I'm not an art expert at all. And I like to hang out in museums and cry about
Oh, that's cool.
art. But it's cool. Like I've really been taking kind of a this practice very seriously
Mm-hmm.
of letting art teach me about facilitation.
Okay.
Where, and I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but it's a series that I've been working on called Art Talks. And they're essentially like imagined
Mm-hmm.
transcripts of conversations between all of my different selves and art.
Yeah.
So when I see art that I really love or that makes me cry, I learn everything I possibly can about the artist, about the era,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then I try, living in New York City, which is where I'm based, is really excellent. Then I can go back and see the art
Mm-hmm.
often. And it's wild how much it's been teaching me about the practice of facilitation and
Yeah.
social justice and political education and process. And I don't know, it's just like it's a change of scenery, I think. And remembering that like we can all have a creative practice regardless of what it is we're actually
Yeah.
doing. Yeah, but I think this that was a really rambling answer, but I think if
No, I
I like
love
had
that
to give
though.
you a really short answer is all three
Yeah.
of those things make me feel like a kid.
No, that's really cool. That's good to know. And you know what you were saying too about just like working on things tangibly. Because I'm even thinking with this podcast, it feels like the emotional labor of like having the interviews and everything. But actually, I'm like having a lot of fun learning the technical aspects of running a podcast,
Mm,
like audio editing, video editing, and just like reaching into that other part of my brain. Because yeah, but I think
yeah.
it's really cool just to see like work that actually has tangible results. Because like you were saying, like I feel like the emotional labor does feel heavy, but like you don't always see those results though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is true for you, but I
Uh-huh.
love it's so refreshing to have a solvable problem. Like
Yes, me too.
and that yeah, and I would imagine with like editing or like working on
Right.
levels or something, you're like, oh, I
Uh-huh.
see what's wrong and I
Uh-huh.
know the solution to it, or I can like learn the solution to it rather than like, ooh, this feels tense. I don't know if we're gonna get through
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that's great.
totally. No, because I think what you were talking about too is reminding me a lot about what I've been thinking. Because actually, I was actually talking with a friend about this today, and finding joy and doing things that really brings us to life too. Because I think they were just saying like, oh, it's we feel bad because like there's so much going on right now. Like, we shouldn't like that guilt of like having joy or even being happy. But I think for me, like in my time, because I burn myself out working too much, and also I'm an empath, so I could really feel what people are feeling too. But I'm like, if I'm so deep in a hole and can't get out, I'm not gonna be helpful to anyone. So just like, I
Yeah.
was telling this person, it's like about us sustaining ourselves as well. It's our own survival too. Like it's like I think I got to that point sometimes to like, oh, I feel bad about being happy because there's so much going on right now. But it's like I feel like we need to really sustain ourselves as well. Like especially when we want to be in this work in the long haul.
Yeah, like they're not separate. And I think like,
Right.
I don't know, I feel like what I hear you saying is making me think of, I think like it's a practice of boundaries too.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
it's irresponsible and unfair to give our whole selves over to something
Right. Right.
that isn't based in joy and humanity.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I think there's also just something about like bringing joy to spaces and like right there's a way to hold multiple truths at once like
Right.
everything that's going on not only in the US but in the world like
Right.
it's like fascism is pretty bad, authoritarianism is pretty bad, and
Yeah.
yeah, so much of what the federal government is doing and
Right.
lots and lots and lots of folks are doing, and um yeah, and I think but like that practice of seeking joy where it exists and like not necessarily manufacturing it, but like,
Hmm.
yeah, filling your own cup or like however, whatever phrasing you want to use. Like, I know for me, like my job has really taught me how to have boundaries and how to actually really care for myself because it shows up. And I would imagine for you as well with the
Hmm.
interviews and even editing, like the things that you need a lot of brain power and like
Right.
emotional awareness for,
Hmm.
like, yeah, if we're burnt out or even hungry, it's
Yeah.
it's
No,
not going to
totally.
go very well.
I know. Yeah, it's funny. It took me like burning out in my early 20s to like get to the place where I am now. And I'm also a single mom, so like having to take care of other human being as well. But like I've had conversations with that with people too. Like how can we teach the next generation of leaders to take care of themselves and not get to that point of burnout?
Mm.
But I don't know. Some people have been saying like, yeah, but that burnout is what taught us like the value of like taking care of ourselves too. I'm like, yeah,
I
but I don't
mean,
want
I
them to
guess.
burn out. But
Like, is that really the cost of admission? I don't know. I don't
they have
know.
to
Well,
experience burnout
yeah,
too.
right. I don't know. I don't know about that. But I mean, can I ask you a question?
Sure, of course.
Um, so yeah, like, how do you navigate that like care for yourself? Like how do you navigate those boundaries and like because yeah,
Yeah.
I also have like had some pretty gnarly burnout, but I'm curious about
Mm,
like how you think about balancing all of those things right
no.
now.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. And yeah, just to be completely honest and transparent, becoming a parent and realizing that I needed to take care of myself in order to take care of her because like if I pour everything into my work and have nothing for her at the end, like I don't know, I think that's why like as my journey has gone, with social justice, the scope has gotten a lot narrower because I think early 20s I was like a lot more radical. We're gonna take down the
Totally.
system. I'm gonna change the world. And I got into the work, I was like, okay, maybe I could just change California. Oh no, maybe just my community or this neighborhood specifically. But I think honestly at this point I'm like, I'm gonna do the best I can in my life. But if I just raise a responsible human being, like that's okay. So I think just shifting my
Yeah.
expectations and being realistic with what I could accomplish because it's like yeah I've talked to people too like in this kind of work if we're doing it full time like we could literally be working 7 days a week 24 hours a day and still not get everything done so I'm like why am I going to burn myself
Right.
out if I'm not going to get everything done anyway.
Right. And the system like benefits off of that. The
Right.
violent system benefits off of that, which
Hmm.
like I don't know. I would push back and say like I think focusing on doing what you can and like raising
Hmm.
a human person like in like love and safety and joy.
Hmm.
I think that's way more radical than like I think what a lot of us, especially in the States, have had like this like I'm gonna be the hero or I'm gonna
Right.
like this like rugged individual. Like yeah, like you're pouring into the future. I think that's way more radical
I
than
appreciate that.
yeah.
And selfishly too, because it's just like I want to be there for her. And but the thing is, like, she's a very ambitious child too, so she's like really involved with different things. So, like going to her flute performance or taekwondo
Yeah.
competitions, I'm like, yeah, I don't want to like miss out on that because I think like for me, I'm not gonna remember down the road, like not. doing the best I could on a work assignment, I'm gonna remember missing my daughter's like competition, which I
Yeah.
would have preferred to be at. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's rough though. And I think for
Yeah.
her too, yeah, even with the podcast, because she's in her room when I do the interviews, but she'll tell me
Okay.
when she comes from school, she's like, "You do so many interviews. Can you just do it in the morning when I'm at school?" So she recognizes that too. So I think she helps me like also be like, okay, well, I need to spend more time with you. But I told her,
Yeah,
no,
that's great.
I'm not doing it like all night. But she's like, you do too many.
Yeah. Yeah, she'll help you with your accountability.
Right. No, but thank you for that. And I'd love to talk with you more about your work around power as well, because I know these aren't always like easy conversations or like for people to even recognize that or like confront those hard truths. So how do you help groups name power honestly, especially when it's uncomfortable or destabilizing?
Yeah, that's a great assessment of it. It all depends on readiness. I
Okay.
think, like some folks might be really steeped in political
Mhm.
education and have like that vocabulary. And so we might just get right into it.
Okay.
There's a double-edged sword because a lot of
Mhm.
organizations who do have that vocabulary often co-opt and weaponize it against each other. There's a lot of
Mhm.
kind of policing each other of
Right.
our language. And it's not everybody, right? Like these are lovely folks that work at these organizations.
Mhm.
And we're all human living in this system.
Mhm.
And then there are other folks who maybe have never had those conversations,
Okay.
at least not explicitly. And I think so it's understanding where folks are in
Mhm.
their journey. And again, coming to it with a curious mindset. Like if I go into my job, and it's hard, sometimes I'm not great at this, but if I go into my job thinking, okay, by the end of this, people will feel exactly this way and have had this awakening, then
Okay.
I can't, there's no way it'll happen, right? Like my job is to be really
Yeah.
open and like be a guide, but not necessarily be married to the outcome, which can be
Mhm.
hard because I have my own ideas and my own politics, and I'm always
Right.
very open about that. And I try to be very open about like, okay, I'm feeling some of my own bias come in to the space. But once we kind of like have an idea of where we are, I like to understand how folks understand power.
Mhm.
Because I think one thing that happens a lot is we think about power as an inherently bad thing.
Right.
And so I work with a lot of leaders, a lot of like executive directors of foundations who are really well meaning
Mhm.
but they're like, oh yeah, no, I should just give away all of my power. And like, well, wait,
Mhm.
hold on. Like
Yeah.
you have a very specific set of power, or you have very like
Mhm.
specific access to power that only you can't
Right.
say, hey, you go into this room of
Right. Right.
like of board members or of trustees or of donors. Like that power is actually very much assigned to you, and so you
Mhm.
got to use it, and you can use it for good. Like power is not inherently
Right.
bad. It's about how
Right.
we use it and like what type of power we're thinking about. So
Mhm.
that's one thing, is like understanding how people understand power. And a lot of folks, especially femme and like
Mhm.
female identifying folks, are really, really scared of their own power. And they think it's
Right.
bad that they have any power. But
Right.
that ends up being like a whole new issue because it means we're kind of abdicating our power by
Mhm.
not using it. So that's like a starting point, and then we'll talk about like the different types of power and the different sources of power. So
Mhm.
types of power might be power over, like really hierarchical. I've got power over
Mhm.
somebody or somebody's decisions or an organization. Um, Power with is more collaborative.
Okay.
Co-power is another form of collaborative power. There are a lot of different types, but I was actually just recently introduced to this idea by my new friend Kai, who is
Okay.
also a facilitator and consultant. This idea of power under, which I think is really interesting, where
Okay.
folks who like really want to quote unquote give away their power or share their
Mhm.
power, partially because like it's a big buzzword in philanthropy right
Mhm.
now. Um, and by doing that, and I kind of mentioned a version of this earlier, but
Okay.
they'll say, well, like you make all the decisions. I'm the one with the money, or I'm the one with the power, but
Yeah.
but you tell me what you want.
Okay.
And Sometimes that can feel like, even in like personal relationships, like, no, no, please just tell me where you want to eat. Like, I
Mhm.
can't make this decision for you. But often that ends in like these institutional settings, that ends up being kind of a conversation of just like, well, we're not going to make the decision. So you make the decision without
Okay.
any of the resources or support needed to make that decision.
Okay.
And we need the power holder's perspective a lot of the time. And so
Right.
it was interesting. Kai introduced me to this idea of like, right, that's power under. Like it's still not super
Yeah.
helpful.
Right. No,
Um,
I've never heard of that. That's
I
really
hadn't
interesting
either.
though. That's
Yeah,
really cool.
yeah. So yeah, so those are like the types of power, but then we also
Uh-huh.
talk about sources of power. Like, are you
Right.
getting power from being a part of the dominant culture, right? Like I walk
Mm-hmm.
into a room, I'm a white lady, I'm cis. Like
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of dominant culture power.
Yeah.
But institutional power is one, obstructive power is
Okay.
one, where
Mm-hmm.
a lot of folks I work with at the staff level,
Uh-huh.
I love you guys. And also, what I hear often is like, we don't have any power. We don't have any power. We don't have any power. We don't have any power, but they have a lot of obstructive power and can stand in
Okay.
the way of things happening quite a bit, which sometimes it's their only source of power in an institution.
Right.
And so, like, yeah, cool, use it. And also, that's still a form of power. So we get into this like power is much more nuanced
Okay.
than how we tend to think of it. So it depends on the situation. Like rarely
Right.
do we end up going into every single piece of that, because it
Mm-hmm.
also that can turn into a really academic conversation. While
Okay.
like the minute I say like, oh no, you do have some, I'm curious about this, I think you actually do have some power, somebody might be super freaked out by that. So
Right.
we've got to like take that time.
Yeah. No, I've had conversations with folks about that too. Like when it comes around like privilege, it's like, no, being guilty about the privilege isn't really that productive, but it's like
Yes.
what you can do with that privilege. I think also like me in my own journey too, like learning that like as people, we're a spectrum. We can be oppressed in some areas, but we're also privileged. So I was also thinking like, for example, like I'm an able-bodied person. Like, so what can I
Mhm.
do with that privilege? So it's like, I don't know. I feel like sometimes people think like we want people to feel like guilty or bad about the privilege. It's like, no, it's not that. It's just like, how can we work together to dismantle these systems that are harmful to like people?
Yeah, exactly. And like that shame comes up and it's not
Hmm.
helpful. And like shame ultimately it can be a very self-centered
Hmm.
thing. And speaking as
Right.
somebody who has had a lot of shame over the years.
Hmm. Totally.
But yeah, so that's like where the facilitation work comes in is also, and I end up doing a lot of executive coaching too, because some things like,
Okay.
ooh, we just need to work through one-on-one. Like that's not a thing staff need to
Hmm.
hear. But yeah, really working through that, like, okay, but like
Hmm.
we've all agreed, like we're working towards the same goal. And of course,
Right.
like
Right.
always doing this with like community agreements and like a very clear container for like what the space is and is
Hmm.
not. Um, but yeah, and I think the other thing that can help, especially when I work with mostly white groups,
Okay.
um, is offering my own experience and journey. And like,
Okay, that's cool.
right, like this isn't coming
Right.
from a like, oh, I know everything and I'm completely
Right.
enlightened and liberated. Like, no,
Yeah.
I still got a lot of stuff to work on.
Yeah.
But to like share my own journey. So we're at the like same side of the table, right? Like we're not,
Hmm.
it's not antagonistic and it isn't
Hmm.
an attack. But it takes a lot of trust building and it takes a lot of consent, like a really, really strong consent practice, and shared vocabulary. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've had clients say like, yeah, Genevieve, most people walk up to the pain and then they walk away from the pain as soon as they start to feel it. And Genevieve just
Right.
makes us sit through
Which
it.
you need to. I think it goes along to
Yeah.
not just with the pain, but also like sitting through hard conversations. I think that's when like change really does happen though, and like sitting
Yeah.
in uncomfortable like situations, but like working through it too instead of just ignoring it.
Yeah. And learning that, especially
Yeah.
for white folks, and
Mhm.
especially for white folks with money,
Mhm.
and wealth, that discomfort isn't a threat. Like
Uh-huh.
discomfort isn't danger. And I think
Right. Right.
I think we've conflated that quite a bit. Like we're
Yeah.
like, right, if there is a threat or there is
Mhm.
danger, like we need to account for that harm. But yeah, and it takes some discernment too of like, is this discomfort or is this harm? Is this
Right.
conflict or is this harm? And yeah, and I don't always get it right. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's how I think about it.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I really love this. And, I'd love to talk with you more about this too. I think I saw this in your bio, but you've said that you want to live in a world where philanthropy doesn't need to exist. So can you just talk more about what you mean about this vision? I really love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So it's a tax code.
Okay.
I think, you know, I was having a conversation with a new friend yesterday,
Okay.
um, and they were like, "If you're so mad at philanthropy, why are you still working in philanthropy?" And I was like, that's a
Uh-huh.
good question. And talk about power, right? Like I have a ton of power
Hmm.
and safety by being independent. I'm not inside of an organization. I can't experience retaliation
Right.
the same way a lot of folks can.
Uh-huh.
And like by nature of my positionality, like a lot of people
Hmm.
hire me to help say like, "Ooh, I don't know if you want to do that."
Uh-huh.
And so yeah, I philanthropy and nonprofits are not going to get us to collective liberation. Full
Hmm.
stop. Like the system can't
Yeah.
do it. It
Right.
and if anything, there are a lot of arguments to be made for there are a lot of arguments to be made that philanthropy and nonprofits. The dog is leaving the office.
I love that.
He'll come back. Um, Also, just like side note, the actual boss of GB Advisory, his name is Dudley. He is a pit bull, and
Okay.
he spends most of the workday on the bed next to
Okay.
my chair. But right now, he's exploring.
Okay.
Um, so, uh, but yeah, essentially, philanthropy and nonprofits are actually often very effective at getting in the way of collective
Hmm.
liberation and
Hmm.
watering a lot of things down. And I know you and I have talked about the book,
Uh-huh.
The Revolution Will Not Be Funded, an anthology put together by a group called Insight, which is about the nonprofit industrial complex. And one of their
Hmm.
big arguments is like, you can't dismantle the state with state funding. It's just
I
not going
thought
to
about it a
happen.
lot. Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all of that to
Uh-huh.
say, I work in philanthropy. I do love the people who work in philanthropy.
Mm.
And when this person asked me, like, you're really mad at philanthropy, but why are you still in it?
Mhm.
I think that we can hijack a lot of parts of philanthropy
Uh-huh.
and like the wealth,
Mhm.
namely, and the access and the power. And there's so many folks who are like really, really working on this more and more to like really unlock resources because the money's there.
Uh-huh.
It's not that the money doesn't exist. And so, really, I think like a world where philanthropy and nonprofits, the dog is back, everybody, um, means that needs are getting met already. Like
Right.
philanthropy and nonprofits are often looked to fill a gap that
Mhm.
um, the state is certainly not filling, but
Right.
also that like neighbors aren't always filling for each other.
Uh-huh.
There are a lot of communities where neighbors are taking care of each other, but with late
Mhm.
stage capitalism, we're pretty disconnected from each other. So, yeah, I think a world where philanthropy and nonprofits don't need to exist is one where people are thriving. People don't need it. People are thriving,
Right.
and I don't know what the answer is to get there. But a lot of people are working on different versions of that answer.
Yeah. And I wonder too, because I've been talking to a lot of folks too, and I know we've also talked about that. And just like we can't dismantle the system using the system's money or like corporations'
Yeah.
money or foundations' money. Like we have to think creatively, like, so how can we support each other? So yeah, I've been even thinking about things like, fundraisers or, like even like
Yes.
donors or something. But like I feel like there like people out there, individuals who would be willing to like donate to a cause too. So I think that it possible, but I think what I've been struggling with too is like we're in so much economic like uncertainty right now too. Like it is hard, I
Mhm.
think, for people to be able to give like that. But Yeah, I think there are options out there. I think even for myself too, like it gets hard because it does require more creative energy, creative thinking. But I
Yeah.
think it is possible, but it just like it'd have to be thinking outside of the box for sure.
Yeah, I think way outside the box because I think, like, right, there are
Mhm.
mutual aid networks and stuff, but I think
Yeah.
it also makes me think of how like the narrative, the like larger narrative around climate change being like, well, like,
Hmm.
yeah, don't use your AC as much. Like, whoa, this isn't an individual problem, right?
Right,
Like,
right.
and I think like similar to philanthropy,
Yeah.
like wealth redistribution can be affected by individuals,
Mm,
but ultimately it's got to be the ruling class. It's got to
okay.
be the wealth holders. And I think like, and so that's like my little
Right.
pocket,
Hmm.
of like working with philanthropy. And not everybody agrees with me and not everybody will hire me, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we do ultimately know how to take care of each other. I think political education is a huge part of that,
I love
especially
that.
for European descended folks.
Hmm.
I come from a very long line of colonizers and
Okay.
early adopters of capitalism, all the way back to the Normans and the Crusades. And you can
Okay.
imagine how that played out in what is now called the United States.
Hmm.
And that, like, huge shout out to an organization called Comrades Education.
Hmm.
They run a course, it's a radical genealogy course called Before We Were White,
Okay.
specifically for European descended folks to understand,
Okay.
like, their legacies. And for some folks, it's a really strong legacy of violence. For other folks, it's a legacy of resistance because, you
Okay.
know, race is an ideology that we invented.
Right. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that I've learned that too. Like, just race is a social construct. Like there are
Yeah.
differences, but it's just like we're the ones. Yeah, because I remember even learning because I studied sociology and Asian American studies and like
Okay.
ethnic
Yeah.
studies, and it's just hearing about whiteness too. And I think like when the Irish first immigrated, they were treated like quote, like treated
Yeah.
like black people, but like they had that connection to having like white skin and having, just separating themselves. But
Yeah.
it's really interesting just like seeing how race dynamics have played out, throughout this country. And I'm not as familiar with other countries, but at least, in the US, how that history has played out for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a huge part of how we get to where philanthropy and nonprofits don't need to
Right.
exist. And like having that more like collectivist view to like,
Yeah.
what's the point of hoarding wealth
No,
when
totally, totally.
like we could there's a tweet or something. It's a tweet or a meme or something that goes around the internet every now and then. And
Okay.
it says something like, man, how did we mess up so bad? We could be like hanging out by a river with our
Oh,
friends, eating
yeah.
berries, and we all have credit scores. Like, what are we doing?
Right. No. I-
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I am aware that this won't happen in my lifetime,
Yeah.
but I don't really care about that. I think it's still worth working towards.
Yeah, no, I agree with you too. And I was curious to hear too, because as we've talked, in this conversation, there is a lot going on, and this work can be heavy sometimes. But what gives you hope right now, even in the midst of like all this uncertainty that's going on? What helps to push you forward?
Oh, I mean, talking to folks like you, talking
Mm-hmm.
to like staying connected to community, both, work wise and also locally, and friends.
Yeah.
Um, I think learning gives me hope.
Okay.
Like learning about like social movement history, learning about our history, learning about my
Mm-hmm.
history, and really like shedding a light on that
Okay.
and not wallowing in it, right? Like we talked about, like not like sitting in shame about it, but like I believe so strongly that we can change our minds about how society is
Yeah.
structured. I We change our minds all the time. Like,
Yeah.
and our brains have been the same structure for many thousands of years. My husband would know the exact number.
Okay.
He talks about this a lot, but
Okay.
like, right, this is not the like, I don't know. I don't think that by our nature we're like fundamentally violent.
No, I
And
agree.
Yeah, and I know a lot of
Yeah.
people disagree with me on that. But yeah, so that gives me hope. Art gives me a lot of hope, and looking back through art history
Yeah.
too, like, right, people were creating in some really, really dark times.
Uh-huh.
And I think like even just like how you talked about raising your kid, like,
Uh-huh.
right, people are like pouring love into each other and pouring love into the
Yeah.
future and being really intentional about it. Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I really love that. Thank you for sharing that. And something that I really want to do with this podcast too is like give listeners like tangible ways to make a difference and just show up differently and contribute towards this positive change. So with that, what would you invite listeners to unlearn and what might they practice instead?
Mm, I love that question. I would invite listeners, and this is an invitation I'm constantly extending to myself as well,
Mhm.
um, to unlearn needing to be right all the time
Oh, okay.
and to learn and practice conflict.
Mhm.
And so unlearn conflict avoidance, I think is what I'm saying. And to learn how to move in conflict with people and how to
Mhm.
like maintain friendships through conflict
Yeah.
and look each other in the eye when we've hurt each other and practice like real kindness and apology,
Yeah.
and not in the way that I think sometimes happens, especially when things are so heightened, where we tend to just like immediately cancel each other. And I'm not talking about people like doing incredible harm. Like,
Right.
no, you don't need to talk to those people. You don't need to let those people in your life.
Right.
But
Right.
like our people who do think similarly to us,
Mhm.
where one thing goes wrong or we start to get embarrassed and then we just never talk about it. Like,
Mhm.
I think apologies and conflict are a really, really important practice. Of course, boundaried
Right.
with healthy boundaries. But yeah, I think like that's huge for relationships and community.
No, I love that too. And I think you bring up a good point. I feel like conflict can be healthy. I don't think like we should strive to like everyone needs to think the same and agree on everything. Like, no, people are going to be different and have
Yeah.
differences in opinions. But like, I feel like what's happening right now is very unhealthy conflict, though. Like name
Hmm.
calling, talking over each other, not really listening to each other. And it's like, no, we
Yeah.
don't want that kind of conflict, though. We want, like how we were saying, like healthy conflict, being able to sit with, feeling uncomfortable and, being honest with each other. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And practicing like real caring accountability,
right,
which
right.
requires us to know ourselves pretty well too, which can be a
Hmm.
pretty scary thing. But um yeah, I think like true, healthy, loving conflict
Yeah,
is a way to build intimacy.
right,
And
right.
like that's, I mean, man, I've been real mad at my friends before and they've been real mad at me before.
Yeah,
And we choose to love each other every single day.
yeah,
And we wouldn't have the level of intimacy we do unless like if we hadn't have really worked through like, hey, that really sucked. I really don't
yeah,
know about that. And
yeah.
yeah, it's really important.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. And, thank you
Thank
so much for your
you.
time. I had such a wonderful time talking with you. And, thank you for sharing your wisdom and your insights and everything. And, I'd love to have you back on, if you're ever up to it again. But, just lastly, how can people find you if they'd like to connect with you?
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was so
Yeah.
lovely
No, this
and
is wonderful.
easy, and I still feel so cared for. I love your questions. Yeah, and it's always so fun to talk to you.
Yeah, same here.
People can find me biking through New York City when the snow has melted.
No, I heard about my sister was
Um,
showing me like a lot of snow. Like, how was it? Like within like
it's
2 days, I think you got a lot of snow, right?
Yeah, we got in 24 hours, we got 18 inches, and
Ooh,
then it was
wow.
snowing again this morning. I know, and it's very pretty, and I'm very
Okay.
glad that all of the kids are having a lot of fun. But right before it snowed, all of the snow from a month ago had just melted, and we
Oh.
were on our bikes, and I was like, yes. And now I am such a brat, but it'll be over soon. Um,
Yeah.
so there's that, but also my like professional self
Mhm.
lives on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
And my website is gv-advisory.com.
Okay.
So if you work at a funding institution
Mm-hmm.
and you are interested in any of this, I'm around. And then my less professional, still professional self also lives on Substack, and it's GV Advisory. My Substack is called Making Mischief at the End of the Empire.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, cool. No, I'd really love to read your writing as well. And, thank you again. I think you're such a wonderful and beautiful human being doing amazing work out there. And I wish you nothing but the best. And yeah, I hope that you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. And I feel those ways about you also. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Well, take care. Okay, bye. Thank you for being here and tuning in to Voices That Propel Us, stories of justice, action, and community. Your presence in this movement matters. If today's conversation moved you, share it, talk about it, and keep the work going. Together, we're not just imagining change, we're making it. Until next time, stay bold, stay grounded, and stay in the fight.
Every time I feel so mad and sad and bad, I say to myself, relax, lean back, it's a brand new day. And every time I feel so down that a frown